Hey guys, welcome back to another Friday Night Folklore. This one is Rose Red and Rose White, otherwise sometimes known as Snow White and Rose Red. Not to be confused with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it's a completely separate character. And this one is one of my mom's favorites, so I'm performing it for her. Once upon a time, there was a little cottage in the woods, and in this cottage lived a woman and her 2 daughters. Outside of the cottage, there was a trestle with 2 rose bushes, one growing up each side. One with beautiful roses as white as snow, and another with beautiful roses as red as blood. The woman's 2 daughters were a lot like these roses. One was as pale as snow, with hair blonde and beautiful, and the other was ruddy and pink, with hair as red as fire. And their names were Snow White and Rose Red. Snow White and Rose Red were 2 very different girls, but very close friends. Snow White was calm and gentle. She liked to stay inside and cook and tend the garden. Rose Red was adventurous and rambunctious. She liked to run through the woods and the fields. But the 2 girls were both kind and gentle and loving, and the forest knew this, so they were never afraid when they went out into the woods because the forest creatures would take care of them. One day, it was winter time, and the rose bushes had been pruned back to protect them from the cold. Snow was just beginning to fall on the ground, and it was falling thick. The 2 girls were inside, warming themselves by the fire, when they heard a knock at the door. Rose Red instantly jumped up and ran over to the door and opened it up to see who it was, and lo and behold, it was an enormous black grizzly bear. Rose Red trembled in fear, and she was going to shut the door, but then the bear spoke and said, "No, please don't close the door. I'm very cold. I wanted to know if you would let me inside so I could warm myself by your fire." And Rose Red was still a bit afraid, but Rose White, being as kind and as gentle as she was, said, "Of course you can come in. Here, warm yourself up." And she took a broom and she brushed all the snow off of the bear's fur. After that, they became fast friends. The bear would visit them every night, and he would bring them treats that he had found in the woods, fish and maple syrup. They looked after the bear, and he looked after them, and when the springtime came, they were very sad to hear the announcement that the bear had to make. "Thank you so much for looking after me this winter," he said, "but I must leave you now. I have to look after my treasure that I have hidden away. You see, the wicked dwarves are trying to steal it away. During the winter time, they hibernate, and so my treasure is safe. But now they will be out and about, and they're cunning and tricksy, and I must protect my gold." The girls were sad to see the bear go, but they knew they would see him again next winter. So when he left, they went about their days and continued how things were before the bear came. One day, Rose Red and Snow White were walking through the woods when they saw a funny little man with his beard stuck between 2 trees. And he said to them, "You there! What are you just standing around gawking for? Come and get me loose." And they came and they tried to pull the little man loose from the tree, but his beard was really stuck. So they came and got scissors and trimmed off the very end so that they could get him loose from the tree. But the dwarf was ungrateful for their help, and he said, "How dare you cut my beard, my beautiful beard? Do you have any idea how long it took me to grow this beard? You don't appreciate fine facial hair." And he picked up his bag of gold and ran off into the woods in a huff. And the girls were like, "All right, that was weird, ungrateful dude," and went about their day. And a few days later, they saw something flopping about in the reeds of the shore of the river. And at first they thought it was a beached fish, so they went over to go and put the fish back when they realized it was a little man. He had been fishing with his fishing rod, but his beard had gotten stuck in the fishing line and was tangled. The fish was much stronger than he was, and it was pulling him into the water. So they take the dwarf, and the 2 of them together manage to kind of pull him out of the water so he can catch his breath. And they're trying to disentangle his beard from the fishing line, but it's really tangled up. So she comes and gets her scissors and cuts the whole beard off. And the dwarf is infuriated. He says, "How dare you? How dare you cut my beard? It wasn't enough that you took the tip off last time, now you had to take the whole thing? What's wrong with you?" And he picks up his bag of gold and storms off into the woods in a huff. And the girls are like, "All right, wow." And throughout the, summer, they keep seeing this little dwarf around, and he's always very rude to them, and sometimes he's in a spot of trouble and they help him, but he's never grateful for it. And one day, as they're walking around, they see this bear walking through the woods. And they find the dwarf trembling at his feet. And the dwarf says, "Help me, help me!" But Snow White recognizes this bear. It's the bear from earlier, the one who stayed with them all winter time. So rather than help the dwarf, they trust their friend the bear, who swats at the dwarf and sends him flying. And the bear takes the bag of gold that the dwarf had, and suddenly he is transformed into a handsome prince. And they are surprised by this. He explains to them, "You see, these dwarves, they've been after my gold this whole time. They cursed me to become a bear in hopes that I would leave the gold alone and that they would get it. And this one, he managed to steal my gold, but in fighting him off and stealing it back, I've broken his curse on me." So the prince married Snow White, and his brother married Rose Red, and the four of them lived happily ever after. Alright. Thanks for watching, guys. Oop.